Beliefs about how we should behave are all bullshit. There is no way for us to do the right thing. Thinking we are doing the right thing is a part of the illusion of being in control. When you place your faith in your own judgment, you place your faith in your judge. You get to believing that your judge is who you are. Catholic parochial education is a perfect model for teaching children that their superegos are who they are. Investment in that belief is the antithesis of healthy aliveness. As a psychotherapist, curing Catholicism is one of the biggest challenges I have. If I put that on insurance forms as a diagnosis, the insurance company won't pay for my services. So I use terminology from another model, anxiety neurosis. One of the worst and most resistant strains of anxiety neurosis is implanted by the Catholic Church because they teach young children that the most important thing in life is being right. Almost all of South America is an exemplary backwater of Catholicism. The Catholic Church is by no means the only source of this teaching. It's just that they are particularly good at it. But we all suffer from varying degrees of this Catholic disease. It is a milestone in growing up to get this. There is no way to be right. There is no right way to behave. There is no way to know you have done the right thing. There is no way to know if what you are planning to do is right. If you got the abortion, was it the right thing? If you had the baby, was it the right thing? You do what you do. You did what you did. The right and the wrong of it are not worth spending a lot of time on. Where to look for people who are interested in the truth. When we commit ourselves to something beyond the campaign for righteousness, we are missionaries for liberation. To return to my original point, we then need to find a missionary group of people who are working to save people from their beliefs. In joining such a group to help save others from their minds, we may get saved occasionally from our own. One of the benefits of having a mind is that this phenomenon occurs. Once you know what you are looking for, it starts to show up. These people are all over the place, and the ones you find will probably be other than the ones I mention, but I will mention a few anyway. Landmark education. Trainings that for a long time were being led by Werner Erhard and Associates are still being led by the Associates. These trainings involve conversations and life designs which get into the details of the technology of creation. These people are working on the integration of Eastern and Western ways of being human, operating from the stand that human beings can learn to be fascinated by playing with their lives, rather than trying to be good children and gain favor, and get someone to take care of them in exchange for being good. Some of the followers of this group are true believers, and therefore full of shit. But you are not going to find a perfect group. We are all still working on something we don't know everything about. Transcendental meditation. People at the TM organization teach a great system for settling down deeply so that noticing gets born again. Many of them are a little too holy and pure, and they don't know shit about how to handle anger as expression. But TM is a great place to learn, and the people are on a mission to help everyone recontact the nourishment of being. Radical Honesty Workshops. My friends and colleagues and I run an 8-day workshop called The Course in Honesty. Here you can find support in telling the truth. The whole workshop involves 8.5 days of residential work and follow-up group meetings. If you want to know more details, call or write. Our address is in the appendix, and our website is www.radicalhonesty.com. Supporting the support you already have. Give this book to your therapist. Give this book to your spouse. Give this book to your friends. Give this book to members of any current group you are in. Start your own Telling the Truth group. Once you get started, write us, and we will see what we can do to help. Your real support is wherever the truth is being told. Chapter 14, The Final Lowdown. The full path of growth from birth to maturity consists of 1. The birth of being, 2. The growth of the mind, 3. A period of domination of the being by the mind, 4. Liberation of the being from the mind, and finally, 5. A mind used by the being. Having told the truth enough, the being becomes liberated from its own mind. Having told the truth enough, the being takes charge of its mind, rather than remaining suppressed by its mind or being ignored because of the preoccupation with its mind. The period of liberation of the being from domination by its mind involves many experiences of disorientation and then reorientation. Reorientation of the being to sources other than the mind is based on being in touch with one's own body and noticing things in the world. During these times, the opportunity for freedom occurs. Freedom from the previously developed network of thought. Thinking becomes merely something else to notice and use when one has become reoriented to experience. Thinking loses its prior status as the primary ruler and jailkeeper of being and becomes more like the chauffeur. Being trapped in the jail of the mind is a disease called moralism. All relief from moralism is temporary because there is no permanent cure. The use of drugs like alcohol and pot can sometimes provide short-term, temporary relief, like using Alka-Seltzer for an upset stomach. Telling the truth is more like a time-release capsule that lasts for days or weeks, or like an exercise and diet program that works to improve your strength and resistance over a period of time. Also, if you're honest, you can have more fun with alcohol and pot. That last sentence, if it didn't make you laugh, may have offended you. That's your moralism. We are all moralists. The more moralistic we are, the more hysterical we are. The more hysterical we are, the further away from experience we wish to be. So we go as far away from nasty old disorganized experience as we can get, which means as far toward an abstract, external point of reference as we can. We have been systematically taught hysteria in the form of moralism. Many teachers think the point of education is to learn rules and learn to value them highly. Well-known moral hysterics like Jerry Falwell or Rush Limbaugh have generated agreement among thousands of people who are comforted by their ability to forcefully recreate this preference for principles over aliveness. The moral hysteria of liberals is not an alternative, but another form of the same thing. Liberal hysterics are not different from reactionary hysterics. The character structure of one's personality, that is, the stability and configuration and intensity of one's value system, is actually independent of the values held. Shouldists are like sadists, and they live amongst all belief systems. Shoulding on yourself and others is like shitting on yourself and others. Integrity, wholeness, at oneness is the opposite of moralism. Having integrity is the opposite of being moral. If one has integrity, one doesn't need morals. People with integrity operate with rules of thumb, not morals. Integrity both results from and is a manifestation of telling the truth. Integrity is not a total cure for the disease of moralism, but significantly reduces its negative effects, simply because if you feel whole, you don't need righteousness to try to feel good. Willingness. Being willing is more important than being right. Paul Tillich called this willingness the courage to be, and was careful to differentiate it from bravery due to a strong will. We do not need willpower. We need willingness. Willpower is at the heart of the life-poisoning system of moralism we are sick of and sick from. Awareness of that being that exists underneath and prior to the rules of order, and identification with that being, is the way out of the trap. That being is always willing. The self-pushing and self-condemnation that comes out of letting your conscience be your guide is a vicious circle. Don't let your conscience be your guide. Follow any goddamn thing else but your conscience. Albert Camus said that the question of the age is whether or not to commit suicide. That is life worth the effort? Are you willing to live, or do you judge that it's not worth the effort? I say the important question is, who's asking? Who asked you? Where is the question coming from? The judge who has poisoned experience through the alienation which judgment itself represents wishes now to make a judgment of whether life is worth the price, since, in his judgment, life never lives up to its billing. Such an arrogant question, is life worth the trouble? When it is answered in the negative and a person commits suicide, the judge who made the decision is preserved at the expense of the being who grew him. Being right is not the most important thing in life. If it was, you might as well kill yourself. Being willing is what counts. If we are willing, we are fools, as any good mind will tell you. Exactly. Fools rush in and learn all kinds of things angels will never know. Grace. The experience of having one's vicious circle of judgment broken in upon is called grace in Christian theology. The event that brings about the break is called a Christ event. The historical Christ story is about a man who broke in on history in the same way in which an individual mind gets broken in on. A Christ event is any event that shakes you out of your conceptual do loop and hands you back your awareness. God is the sense of willingness. God is the involuntary nervous system in your body that keeps everything running regardless of what you think. You relate to God by being aware. You relate to God by becoming who you are, which is an awareness. You relate to God by becoming God. When you are most aware of relating to another being, you are most in touch with God. God is the collective involuntary nervous system of people. God is the ineffable experience of awareness, of being related to another. God is receiving yourself and another person in being, as you are in any moment. God is the eternal split-second sound-light being. God is when what is so objectively is subjectively experienced. Awareness is the key practice for the experience of Godness. What I think Kierkegaard meant when he said, a person who relates to another person and relates also to that relationship relates thereby to God, is that a consciousness relating consciously to another consciousness relates to all consciousness. A being who relates to another being relates thereby to all of being. We all, Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, psychotherapists, lovers, agree on this. Being willing does not mean you never play the game of judgment. Being aware does not mean you have no conscience. The difference is in flex. As you may have noticed, I particularly love playing the game of judgment and condemnation of the Catholic Church. I love my experience of rightness and righteousness, righteous indignation about those poor assholes. I like the experience just like any other righteous prick, Catholics included. The difference is I have more to sustain me than my beliefs, mostly from luck rather than virtue on my part. I have been lucky. These poor suffering bastards who never grew out of pre-adolescent moralism that make up the iron-fisted keepers of the rules the world over believe in their beliefs and will kill rather than face dying to their beliefs. Priests and generals and rigid revolutionaries are in need of Christ events for delivery from the deadly seriousness of their games. Republicans, lawyers, John Ashcroft, Catholics, Baptists, Shiite Muslims, and other assholes like them who are adolescent moralists are great targets for my own adolescent righteousness and moralism. At least I can enjoy mine and let up now and then. Because of that, I occasionally feel sorry for them and begin to have compassion for their addiction to righteousness. The dirty little secret is out of the bag now. Your conscience is the devil. The revolution of our times is the revolution of consciousness. The government to be overthrown is the government of conscience. with its bureaucracy of moralism. Conscience inhibits being. We are developing our awareness to beat the devil. Everyone knows intuitively that the bullshit moralism and rules of good behavior of official religions have nothing whatsoever to do with the spiritual experience the religion is based upon. How we should behave is really an unanswerable question. The closest thing to an answer is to be willing and see what happens. Most of us might be willing to try that if we could be sure everyone else wasn't. We make up rules and sell them to other people, and their children mostly, to protect our own asses. The truth is this: we grow up, we grow old, we die. We all do that, and how we do it doesn't matter much. We all have to do about the same thing anyway. Believing we are doing the right thing is the centerpiece of our illusion of control of this process where we, in fact, have no real control. Beliefs are only useful as toys. Loving a belief is like loving a teddy bear. Defending beliefs as though they were sacred only demonstrates your stupidity. I truly believe that. Dylan Thomas's poem, Lament, is about growing up, growing old, and dying. The manner of death, in the end, is death by virtue. Being killed by virtue is by far the commonest cause of death. Death is nature's way of telling you you ought to let up on yourself. This poem is about an old man looking back on his life. Dylan Thomas wrote it for his father when his father was dying. Lament. When I was a gusty man and a half, and the black beast of the Beatles' pews, sighed the old ramrod dying of bitches. Not a boy and a bit in the wick, dipping moon and drunk as a new-dropped calf, I whistled all night in the twisted flues, midwives grew in the midnight ditches, and the sizzling beds of the town cried. Quick, whenever I dove in a breast-high shoal, wherever I ramped in the clover quills, whatsoever I did in the coal, black night, I left my quivering prints. When I was a man you could call a man, and the black cross of the holy house, sighed the old ramrod dying of welcome. Brandy and ripe in my bright base prime. No spring-tailed Tom in the red-hot town, with every simmering woman his mouse, but a hillocky bull in the swelter of summer come in his great good time to the sultry bidding herds, I said. Oh, time enough when the blood creeps cold, and I lie down but to sleep in bed, for my sulking, skulking, coal-black soul. When I was a half of the man I was, and serve me right as the preachers warn, sighed the old ramrod dying of downfall. No flailing calf or cat in a flame, or hickory bull in milky grass, but a black sheep with a crumpled horn. At last the soul from its foul mouse hole slung pouting out when the limp time came, and I gave my soul a blind slashed eye, gristle and rind and roarer's life, and I shoved it into the coal-black sky to find a woman's soul for a wife. Now I am a man no more, and a black reward for a roaring life, sighed the old ramrod dying of strangers. Tidy and cursed in my dove-cooed room, I lie down thin and hear the good bells jaw, for oh, my soul found a Sunday wife in the coal-black sky, and she bore angels. Harpies around me out of her womb, chastity prays for me, piety sings, innocence sweetens my last black breath, modesty hides my thighs in her wings, and all the deadly virtues plague my death. There you have it. Aliveness declines to virtue, which leads to death. For some, that death is the kind that comes when you start a worm farm. For others, that death is an ego death, and it makes room for the rebirth of aliveness. The dying that brings rebirth comes about as a result of learning how to tell the truth. Marilyn Ferguson speaks of how we keep trying to use our poor little left brain faculty to keep up with what's going on and what comical, pathetic creatures we are in the attempt. Quote, Change and complexity always outrun our powers of description. When the left brain confronts the nonlinear dimension, it keeps circling around, breaking holes into parts, retracing its data, and asking inappropriate questions like a reporter at a funeral. Where, when, why, how? We have to inhibit its questions for the moment, suspend its judgment, or we cannot see the other dimension, any more than we can see both perspectives of an optical illusion staircase at the same time, or be swept away by a symphony while analyzing the composition. We are all that kind of left brain-minded fools. We are all jerks running on unfinished, old-timey, remembered experience and at the direction of outmoded models of the mind. It's how we operate. It's our nature. It's how we all are. Denying that makes you spastic. Affirming that makes you just a regular jerk. This is the era of the takeover of the world by Spastics Anonymous. Members of Spastics Anonymous have given up wasting time trying to prove they're not jerks. Anyone stupid enough to have faith in his or her own judgment is a spastic and the biggest damned fool of all. We evoke feelings from the past by either remembering or wishing. Wishing and remembering are attempts to stay alive, enlivened with feelings we choose to re-experience. Wishing and remembering are great fun. When we are remembering, for a while, we can re-evoke feeling. We get a chance to experience over again some pleasant experience we once had, and we have some sense of control over and distance from what we are remembering. But these re-experienced experiences peter out. They wear out partly because a long stay in heaven becomes hell. They wear out partly because a long stay in heaven becomes hell. Damn. There is nothing to do in heaven. Everything is fixed, nothing is broken, everything is perfect. Heaven wears out. Nostalgia ain't what it used to be. So we turn our attention to the future to enact new fantasies based on pleasant experiences from the past. These fantasies about the future, based on the past, are the hope and hype we con ourselves with. Even if we get what we always wanted, it never looks like we thought it would when it arrives. Success, therefore, leads to disillusionment. As Eclasticles says, all is vanity and a striving after the wind. We end up in hell again. Our memories of heaven are what make hell possible. Only after years at this can we begin to give up faith in our own fantasies and still play with them anyway. Then we discover the good news that hell makes heaven possible. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here, was the sign marking Dante's entrance to hell. But his trip into hell was the beginning of the path to heaven. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here is, in fact, the sign over the gateway to heaven. Each individual who matures to adulthood has to go through a late adolescent hell and beyond. We have to learn to live lies as a stage of growth. We need to be lost in a life of lying before the possibility of deliverance from hell presents itself. We have to learn how to avoid the moment and control our experience of the world through wishing, hoping, being lost in memory, lying, and being lost in our minds. We have to be successful at this and despair of it and then escape from it without losing its advantages. All of that learning, all of that schooling and evaluation was just a trick. After it has totally lost its value, it becomes of some use.